In a shadowy and menacing castle, the Demon Lord prepares to launch his campaign to conquer the world. To aid him, he summons his 4 demonic generals: Almandra the Inferno, Sylphid the Storm, Gnome the Earthen Bastion, and, last but not least, the most jaded and soulless of them, all an underpaid Japanese salaryman. Denosuke began his career at the company as an unremarkable salaryman, filled with hope and confidence that he would eventually climb the promotion ladder. However, while Denosuke dedicated himself to working hard for the company, his co-workers focused on currying favor with the boss. As a result, they received the promotions Denosuke had been striving for, while he was unceremoniously sent to another country to assist with the company's expansion efforts. Upon arrival, Denosuke found that literally nothing was getting done because the site had no funding. He tried to convince his boss to approve more funding so they could buy the necessary equipment, but that would cost money, so his boss refused and yelled at him for wasting resources. The locals couldn't care less about the job if they weren't going to be given the necessary tools, so they left, leaving Denosuke to do everything by himself. Seeing how tirelessly Denosuke was working all on his own, the locals were inspired and eventually came back to assist him. With their help, he finally managed to get everything up and running. Just as he thought things were settling down, he received a call from his boss. Denosuke initially believed his efforts had finally been acknowledged and hoped for a well-deserved bonus. However, he couldn't have been more wrong. There wasn't even a token pizza party in his honor. Instead, all he got for his relentless hard work was even more work. His company decided to transfer him to yet another country for a different expansion project. By this point, Denosuke had begun to question his life choices, realizing that he was wasting his life for a company that clearly didn't care about him. While distracted by his existential dread, he wasn't paying attention to his surroundings and ended up getting run over by Moped Kun. That kind of explains how he ended up here. But Denosuke thinks there must have been some kind of mistake, because there's no way the Demon Lord meant to summon a guy like him. The Demon Lord addresses Denosuke by name and informs him that he has been summoned to serve as his new overseas manager. The Demon Lord explains that he has thoroughly reviewed reports detailing Denosuke's relentless efforts, being assigned to his company's overseas branch, mastering the local language, and earning the trust of the locals to successfully establish the business. Based on these accomplishments, the Demon Lord is convinced that Denosuke is the ideal candidate to become one of his 4 elite generals. Denosuke is kind of happy since this is the first time anyone has actually acknowledged all the hard work he's been putting in. However, he's hesitant to accept the position of Demon General because that would technically mean betraying humanity. The Demon Lord mentions that the position comes with full workers' benefits, and suddenly, Denosuke doesn't think joining the Demon Army is such a bad idea anymore. Moreover, the Demon Lord genuinely values workers' rights, so he makes it clear that Denosuke won't be forced to take the job if he's not interested. This approach makes Denosuke feel even more inclined to join. Reflecting on his past, he recalls how poorly he was treated at his previous company, making him doubt whether someone like him is worthy of such an important position. Just as he's about to turn down the Demon Lord's offer, the Demon Lord interrupts, declaring that Denosuke shouldn't let the mistreatment he faced at his old workplace determine his self-worth. The Demon Lord reminds Denosuke that his old company was run by obnoxious, selfish managers who only cared about themselves and would never pay attention to all the work he was putting in behind the scenes. The Demon Lord won't make that mistake because he knows how valuable Denosuke is as an employee. Now Denosuke has a choice: go back to his old company and be treated like trash once more, or stay here and help build the demon army. Denosuke remains reluctant to accept, but before he can respond, Almandra suddenly speaks up, voicing her objection to the idea of a weak human joining the demon army. Sylphid and Gnome quickly chime in as well, doubting how someone like Denosuke could possibly be of any use. Acknowledging their skepticism, the Demon Lord decides to put Denosuke through a test to prove to the others just how capable he truly is. Denosuke starts freaking out, trying to explain to the Demon Lord that he has no powers and can't fight, but it's already too late. Almandra decides to attack him at full force to see what he's made of. She's heard something about otherworldly humans possessing special powers and tells Denisuk to try and stop her deadly kick. Just as the kick is about to land, the demon lord steps in and intercepts it. Olmandra, confused, asks why he stopped her, but the demon lord calmly explains that she didn't let him finish speaking and completely misunderstood the situation. He gestures toward poor Denisuk, who had been so terrified by the ordeal that he fainted from the shock. The others are surprised because Olmandra wasn't even trying that hard for Denisuk to pass out from an attack like that. It makes it seem like he's just a regular human. The demon lord informs them that Denisuk truly is just an ordinary human, which only fuels the others' objections further. They argue that the demon army is entirely comprised of monsters, and if a human were to get involved in the ongoing power struggle between the demons and demi-humans, he would be devoured almost immediately. The demon lord acknowledges the existing friction among the factions within his army, but he insists that this is precisely why he needs Denisuk and the unique skills he brings to the table. He clarifies that he's not looking for someone with a durable body or immense attack power. Instead, what he values most in Denisuk is his ingenuity and resourcefulness. Just then, Denisuk finally regains consciousness and begins pleading for them to let him go because there's no way he can deal with attacks like the one Olmandra just tried to hit him with. The demon lord tells him to calm down and explains that he won't be expected to fight, but he does intend to give Denisuk a fitting exam. He explains that the demon army is currently trying to create a pact with the surrounding tribes. So far, they've managed to reach agreements with the salamanders and werewolves, but negotiations with the Minotaur tribe have been quite difficult. Denisuk's test will be to do whatever it takes to form a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Denisuk's exceptional negotiation skills, the demon lord believes it should be straightforward to earn the trust of the Minotaurs and strike a peaceful agreement. Denisuk, however, fails to see anything simple about trying to negotiate with Minotaurs. Despite his doubts, the demon lord is confident in his abilities and encourages Denisuk to consult Olmandra if he has any questions. Afterwards, Olmandra leads Denisuk down the hall so he can begin negotiating with the Minotaurs. She thinks this is a huge waste of time since there's no way a human like Denisuk can negotiate with Minotaurs. Denisuk also thinks she's right about him being useless, but the demon lord seemed so sincere when he talked about how much he needed Denisuk. All Denisuk has ever wanted is to have his hard work recognized, so he wants to live up to the demon lord's expectations as much as he can. At that moment, Olmandra informs Denisuk that they've arrived at the meeting room where the Minotaur tribe's chief is waiting. Denisuk is taken aback by the enormous size of the room, but Olmandra explains that it's only natural since Minotaurs are such large creatures. As a word of caution, she warns him that Minotaurs are notoriously ferocious, and if he isn't careful, he might find himself trampled to death. As Olmandra opens the door, Denisuk has no idea what to expect from the Minotaur chief, but he intends to do his best to negotiate no matter what. However, once he actually sees the Minotaur chief, he freaks out. There's no way he could negotiate with someone like Terius without instantly dying. Olmandra feels bad for him, so she offers to help with the negotiations, and Denisuk is really thankful for the help. But then he sees Olmandra start arguing with Terius, and he gets the feeling that negotiations aren't going so well. Olmandra can't comprehend why Terius is dissatisfied with everything they've offered him. Terius claims that she doesn't understand what he's trying to say, and as a result, no progress is made on the pact. Frustrated, Olmandra leaves the meeting room. She struggles to understand why Terius is now so resistant to the agreement, especially since he was initially open to the idea. Just as they were about to finalize the deal, he suddenly started shouting blah blah repeatedly, despite returning several times to see if he might change his mind. All Terius ever says is blah, leaving Olmandra completely unable to figure out what he wants. Olmandra can't possibly see a resolution, so she's going to leave the rest for Denisuk to figure out. Although she fully expects him to fail miserably, Denisuk starts having a full-on panic attack because he thinks there's no way to get around this mess. As he's walking through the halls trying to figure out what to do, he spots a bar sign and decides to head in to clear his head. The bartender hands him a warm towel to help him relax, and Denisuk orders a drink as he takes a seat to gather his thoughts. He wants to focus on the negotiations, but he feels stuck since there's little he can do if the client outright refuses to negotiate. However, as he reflects, Denisuk begins to suspect that Terius might not actually be rejecting the negotiations entirely. He recalls a similar experience from his past, where a client kept saying no, but by carefully reading the client's eyes, he was able to discern their true intentions, ultimately leading to a successful agreement for both parties. Now Denisuk knows what he needs to do. He finishes his drink and heads outside to do what businessmen do: negotiate. Meanwhile, Olmandra is back in the Demon Lord's throne room giving a report about her conversation with Terius. It didn't lead to any meaningful breakthrough, so she doesn't think Denisuk will be able to achieve anything either, especially since he just arrived in this world today. The Demon Lord, however, still believes in Denisuk and urges Olmandra to wait and see what he's capable of achieving. Though Olmandra doesn't understand what the Demon Lord sees in Denisuk, she decides to check on him to ensure he's doing all right. When she finds him, he's busy stuffing several bags full of hay. Curious, she asks what he's up to, and Denisuk explains that he's preparing to have a proper conversation with Terius. She tries to tell him that it's pointless since Terius isn't willing to negotiate, but Denisuk still thinks there's a chance. He just needs to look Terius in the eyes and convey his emotions properly so the two of them can understand each other. Olmandra observes that Denisuk seems much more confident than before, and this time, he enters the meeting room to speak with Terius without a trace of fear. The next morning, Olmandra goes to the meeting room to check if Denisuk has survived the night. However, when she peers inside, she's met with the sight of a room filled with hay, but neither Denisuk nor Terius is anywhere to be found. At first, she thinks the negotiations must have failed, leading to a massive fight, but just then, Denisuk comes in and tells her everything is fine. In that case, she wants to know why there's hay all over their sacred demon castle, and more importantly, she asks where Terius went. Denisuk tells her that Terius is currently finalizing the pact agreement with the Demon Lord. Olmandra is stunned that Denisuk managed to secure Terius's agreement in just one night. Denisuk explains that all he did was take the time to understand Terius better, which made the negotiation process surprisingly simple. Olmandra had assumed Terius was refusing to negotiate because he kept shouting blah repeatedly. However, as it turns out, Terius actually believed the negotiations were progressing smoothly all along. Denisuk had experienced something like this before with an international client. The client in question was really enthusiastic about saying no to him. So Denisuk thought the negotiation was going to end in failure, but to his surprise, the man then reached out for a handshake, and he realized it was all a misunderstanding. The same thing applied to Terius. Denisuk took some time to research Minotaur culture and discovered that Minotaurs always bring hay with them to use as bedding whenever they visit someone else's home. It turned out that Terius had been trying to request his hay all along. Once Denisuk realized this, the negotiation proceeded without any further issues. Now, Olmandra realizes that she had misunderstood Terius and left him in that room to sleep on the cold floor, so she feels really bad. But Terius tells her it's alright since it was an honest mistake, and he shakes her hand to show that there are no hard feelings. As Terius departs, the Demon Lord approaches Denisuk and Olmandra. He asks Olmandra if she now understands why he's so eager to have Denisuk join their ranks. Olmandra concedes that Denisuk truly has remarkable skill when it comes to negotiations, having successfully passed the Demon Lord's test. Denisuk is officially appointed as one of the Demon Lord's 4 generals. To mark this new position, the Demon Lord places a bracelet on Denisuk's arm as a symbol of his authority. As a gesture of her newfound respect for Denisuk, Olmandra formally introduces herself and expresses her eagerness to work alongside him as a new friend. Denisuk is gradually finding his footing as one of the demon generals. It's a relief that he now has his own office and a boss who seems supportive, but it's clear this new environment will take some time to adjust to. Now that his position as one of the demon generals is official, Denosk decides it's only right to formally introduce himself to the others. With that in mind, he makes his way to Sylphid's room and gives a knock at the door. To his surprise, it's a girl who answers and asks him what he wants. Denosk explains that he's here to introduce himself to Sylphid. However, the girl responds curtly, informing him that she's Sylphid's assistant and that Sylphid is a very busy man, so she can't allow Denosk to bother him. Denosk is disappointed, but knew he was bound to face some pushback from the other demon generals. He decides to just come back later to try again. However, before he could leave, Olmandra comes running up to him because she has something important to say. The demon lord has another assignment for Denosk, so Denosk goes to meet with him immediately and is informed of an agreement he is working on for the demon army to grow in strength. He needs the support of all the surrounding demi-human nations, and among all those nations, the ogre tribe is particularly influential. Their military strength rivals that of the demon army, making them a potential threat to the demon empire if they were to turn hostile. For this reason, the demon lord is aiming to hold merger negotiations with them to unite their forces. However, the ogres are famously difficult to bargain with, and so far, no agreements have been made. Even so, with Denosk handling the matter, the demon lord is confident that an agreement can be reached, which is why he's granting Denosk full authority over the negotiations. While Denosk is grateful for the demon lord's trust in him, he can't ignore the very real danger of potentially losing his life to the ogres if he goes alone. Olmandra volunteers to escort him to the ogre tribe. However, before that, Denosk says he wants to go meet with Gnome since she's in charge of the demi-human division of the demon army, and she might have some valuable information about the ogres. Olmandra thinks Denosk is right, but absolutely refuses to go anywhere near Gnome because she has beef with her. So, instead, she says she'll go check on the carriages while Denosk talks with Gnome. Denosk makes his way to the training grounds, where Gnome is conducting her daily training session. He is thoroughly impressed by what he observes. Not only are Gnome's soldiers highly skilled in combat, but she also excels at keeping their morale exceptionally high. After the training concludes, Gnome turns her attention to Denosk and inquires about the reason for his visit. Denosk explains that he is there to ask if she has any information about the ogre tribe. Gnome admits she doesn't know much, but mentions that their leader, Augur, is infamous for being incredibly difficult to engage in conversation. She warns Denosk that negotiating with him will be a significant challenge. Unfortunately, she explains, there's little she can do to assist in this matter. Besides, she has no interest in collaborating with Olmandra under any circumstances, so she firmly asks Denosk to take her away from there. Denosk didn't even realize Olmandra had been standing behind him, so he asks her why she's here and why she's so angry. Olmandra says she already finished checking the carriages, so she came to get Denosk since she was worried about him, but she can't contain herself after seeing Gnome. The two start arguing, and Denosk is starting to get worried about how much Olmandra and Gnome hate each other. Denosk and Olmandra finally reach the ogre castle, but before they can go inside, they are halted at the gate and informed that they must wait for Chief's permission to enter. Olmandra finds it absurd that they are being left outside for so long. But Denosk, having encountered this tactic before, realizes that Augur is deliberately using the delay to unsettle them and weaken their ability to negotiate effectively. He knows it's crucial for them to remain composed. However, Olmandra is barely managing to contain her growing fury and seems ready to lose her temper. Thankfully, before she can act out, Augur's assistant comes out and tells the two that they may now enter. As they walk in, Denosk notices how scruffy Augur's armor looks. Eventually, they make it to Augur's throne room and come face to face with Augur himself. But when Olmandra tries to start the negotiations, he tells her to shut up. He doesn't care why they are here, because he's never going to listen to what they have to say unless, of course, they came to surrender to him, in which case he might hear them out, but only if they agree to kill their chief, the Demon Lord. Olmandra can hardly believe the sheer absurdity of what just came out of Augur's mouth, and she's seconds away from losing it completely. However, Denosk quickly grabs her hand, urging her to stay calm, reminding her that a violent reaction is precisely what Augur is trying to provoke. Turning to Augur, Denosk speaks in his most composed and professional tone, stating that he and Olmandra are stepping outside for a quick discussion. Once they're outside, Olmandra unleashes her fury, ranting about Augur's audacity and cursing his very existence for daring to say such a thing. She's absolutely ready to march back in and rip him apart, but Denosk manages to steady her, reiterating that reacting to Augur's provocation is playing right into his hands. He is intentionally saying things to get them angry in hopes that they cause a scene so negotiations break down. That way, he can avoid directly rejecting the negotiation and blame its failure on the two of them. Now that she knows what Augur was trying to do, Olmandra decides to calm herself down. But she's still really frustrated by the fact that Augur insulted the Demon Lord. To be honest, Denosk is just as angry, but acting on that anger would only hurt their chances of success here, so they have to be careful about how they respond. That said, Augur has no intention of negotiating, leaving them with few options at this stage. At that moment, the girl they encountered earlier appears and introduces herself as Olulu, Augur's daughter. Acknowledging that her timing might seem impolite, she hesitantly makes a request. She asks for Denosk and Olmandra's assistance in handling her father. Olulu then guides them to a vacant room, explaining that it serves as the food cellar, and as they can plainly see, it's completely empty. The ogres are known for their strength and influence among the demihumans, but recently they've run into financial trouble, and it has gotten so bad that a lot of their people are struggling to find food to eat. Denosk assumes something like this was going on because when they came in, he saw the terrible state of the ogre's equipment along with the cold and empty feeling he got from the castle itself. This kind of situation usually occurs when large companies begin to decline. They make it seem like everything's going well, but on the inside, they are constantly on the brink of bankruptcy. That's exactly what's going on with the ogre tribe, and Olulu believes that the only way to rebuild it is to rely on the demon army's help. Her father, however, refuses to listen to her, and to make matters worse, he's currently ill. They've been trying to keep his condition a secret, which is why they had Olmandra and Denosk wait outside earlier while they prepared him for the meeting, but his health is steadily deteriorating. Augur doesn't have much time left, and if he were to die under the current circumstances, it would spell disaster for their tribe. Desperate, she begs Denosk for his help. While Denosk acknowledges her concerns, he also reprimands her for divulging such critical information. As the chief's daughter, she needs to exercise greater caution when deciding who to trust. Olulu can tell that Denosk is a good person. She's pretty confident in her ability to discern the nature of people, which is why she told him about the situation. Now, she asks Denosk to help her save the ogre tribe by marrying her. After hearing this, Denosk freaks out, and Olmandra begins burning with rage. But Olulu is serious about her proposal. All the ogres in her tribe are as dumb as rocks, so the only way for Olulu to ensure the prosperity of the tribe is for a smart guy like Denosk to marry her and become the new chief. Denosk attempts to dissuade Olulu from making any hasty decisions, but she's adamant that this is the only way to save the ogre tribe. She's even ready to make their marriage official on the spot, but Olmandra steps in and prevents it from happening. Later that evening, Denosk finds himself in his office, grappling with the predicament he's in. Augur refuses to negotiate, and Olulu is determined to marry him. Failing his second mission for the Demon Lord is not an option, so he decides to retreat to the bar in his mind to clear his thoughts. This time, however, Denosk isn't alone. His imaginary version of Olmandra is seated at the table next to him, engaged in a lively debate with the bartender over which is cooler, gorillas or lions. Realistically, a gorilla could wipe the floor with a lion any day, but Olmandra argues that lions are cooler because a group of them is called a pride. The moment Denosk hears this, he snaps out of his trance, and suddenly, he has a brilliant and foolproof plan to tackle the situation. The first thing the next morning, Denosk calls Olmandra outside. He apologizes for waking her up so early, but explains that he needs her help for a new negotiation plan. For Denosk's plan to work, they need to go somewhere else first. If all goes well, Augur will be the one begging for a negotiation meeting. 1 week later, Denosk and Olmandra are called into the chief's throne room, just as Denosk had planned, and Augur looks pretty mad. Augur has just learned that all the neighboring tribes have allied with the demon army over the past week, and he demands an explanation. A week earlier, Denosk had shared his strategy with Olmandra. Rather than focusing on convincing Augur, they would first recruit the smaller tribes. It wouldn't be too difficult since, like Augur's tribe, the other tribes were also grappling with food shortages, making them susceptible to the promise of support. While Olmandra grasped the logic behind Denosk's plan, she hadn't anticipated it would succeed so effectively. By forcing Augur into negotiations, Denosk's strategy mirrored what he used to do when selling products back on Earth. If he tried to approach a big company directly, he would usually be rejected. Instead, he would market to smaller companies first, and eventually, the big company would be forced to contact him to avoid being left behind. Similarly, if all the surrounding demihumans joined the demon army, the prideful chief wouldn't let that go unanswered. For the moment, Denosk feigns ignorance, claiming he merely proposed an alliance with the smaller groups to help them survive by gaining the demon army's support. This explanation only fuels Augur's anger further, as he never authorized any negotiations. Everything is unfolding perfectly, though, because with Augur now visibly agitated, he becomes far more vulnerable to Denosk's negotiation techniques. Denosk then calmly reveals that these alliances weren't orchestrated by him alone, he had Olulu's assistance. Augur can't believe that his own daughter would betray him like this, but she tells him it was necessary for the sake of their ogre tribe. The only way out of their current situation is to rely on the demon army's aid. As much as he may not want to admit it, times have changed. He's grown old and is currently sick, so they need to join the demon army to survive. Just then, Denosk chimes in and offers an alternative to Augur. Instead of joining the demon army, they could form an equal partnership. Truthfully, Denosk is making this up. He hasn't altered a single detail of the agreement. However, by presenting it as an equal partnership, it appeals to the pride of the ogre chief, making him far more likely to consider it. As anticipated, Augur doesn't appear entirely against the idea, but requests some time to mull it over. A couple of days later, Olmandra comes running into Denosk's office to share the good news. She tells Denosk that Augur has agreed to the alliance with the demon army. While this is great news, Denosk has more pressing matters to handle. The demon lord told him to pick out an assistant, so he has been reviewing applications. Honestly, he wishes he could just pick Olmandra since she's so reliable. Olmandra misunderstands this as a proposal and becomes a little embarrassed. At that moment, there's a knock at the door. Denosk opens it to find Olulu standing there. She announces that she's come to act as a representative of the ogre tribe in their alliance with the demon army. Expressing her deep gratitude, she explains that her father has become far more diplomatic since their encounter. To show her appreciation, she says she's willing to do anything to repay him. Taking her at her word, Denosk asks if she would like to become his personal assistant. Olulu eagerly agrees, but this makes Olmandra jealous, and she pointedly avoids making eye contact with Denosk. She reminds herself that they're supposed to be rivals, which means she can't allow herself to be friends with him. Denosk has no clue why Olmandra suddenly started behaving so oddly. That aside, it's been a successful month for him. The demon army has expanded significantly. However, with growth comes heightened risk, so it's essential for everyone to remain vigilant. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.